Deborah Murphy here. I'm joined by Jeffrey Fitzpatrick Stillwell, Senior Manager of Sustainability at McDonald's Restaurants of Canada, and we're downtown Calgary. You're about to announce something pretty big for McDonald's Canada. Tell us about that.
Yeah, thanks. So today we're here to announce that we've achieved a commitment that we made as a global company back in January of 2014, which was to begin purchasing a portion of our global beef supply from verified sustainable sources. And so today we're announcing that we spent the last 2.5 years working with Canadian producers here, and we've made that commitment. We have verified that we are purchasing sustainable beef as we've designed in the pilot, and it's a really great moment today, not only for McDonald's and McDonald's Canada, but it's a great opportunity for the Canadian industry, I think, to take a leadership stance and say, we really helped this. We couldn't have done it without them.
So I want to talk to you about what is sustainable beef, but first of all, why did McDonald's take it upon itself to do this pilot project?
Yeah, I think it's really twofold. So on one side, we've always been a responsible company that wants to do the right thing. So we were doing a lot of activities and all kinds of sourcing already, but a lot of it was sort of behind the scenes. We just weren't talking about it to consumers directly. We were really focusing internally, making sure we were doing everything. And then over the last sort of decade, I think everybody's seen consumers have a growing interest in how their food is grown and raised and where it's coming from. So we certainly sense that. And as social media has developed, we've certainly felt that. So this was a really unique opportunity for us to take some of that awareness and really say, okay, we want to talk to consumers about, our stand as a company and where we are and the things we believe in and the goals that we're setting. But we need to do that in a beyond McDonald's says so way. And that's really why the aspect of third-party verification that we've brought into the pilot was so essential. And then, of course, the multi-stakeholder collaboration that we've had with the industry here too. So it's, we've acknowledged from the beginning, McDonald's is not the experts in beef sustainability, so we need to work with those who are if we really want to understand it and then talk to consumers about it.
And so did those people help you define that whole sustainable beef and what is verified sustainable beef? And can you tell us what that means to you?
Yeah, and that's why, again, it's a really great opportunity for the Canadian industry here, because the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef had developed a high-level definition of what sustainable beef is, and that you could apply anywhere in the world. And then they also developed principles and criteria for those that, again, would be applicable anywhere in the world. But this pilot project in Canada is the first time that those principles and criteria were brought to life in a locally relevant way, and then adding in that ability to do the verification aspect and use a bit of a chain of custody, which we use the Beef Information Exchange for, to link that all together. So Canada's the first to do it. We couldn't have done it without the Canadian beef producers and the whole beef value chain here, who really came together for us and really supported us. I think once they understood that this wasn't about a marketing claim for McDonald's, this was really about a long-term, we wanted to demonstrate real leadership, so we wanted to invest resources, we wanted to invest time and money in really accelerating what the Canadian industry was already doing.
You use the term verified, so what's the difference between that and certified?
So it's there's a distinction. It's often a hard one to parse, but certification really refers to more of something that's already a set standard, and then you're hiring an auditor to certify that you're meeting a standard that already exists. Because there isn't a standard for sustainable beef production, we were basically developing, and it wasn't a standard that we developed, but we were developing a process that you could then verify. And I think the real distinction between certification and verification for us was certification is really sort of policing against a set standard, and often it can sort of fall down into a binary checklist process of here's the thing you do or don't do something. What we really wanted this to be, and what verification allows, is a conversation, dialogue between producers and the verifiers. So it's critically important that the verification be third party, so it's not McDonald's, it's not Cargill or JBS, it's not someone in the value chain, but it is giving you the credibility to talk to consumers because it's an independent expert who's going, but is having that conversation and asking, how are you achieving positive outcomes as defined in the pilot? under natural resources conservation and different indicators. And I use the example all the time, which is one I think really brings it to life, which is the Global Roundtable has a high-level principle, animal health and welfare. They have a criteria underneath that for protection for animals from extreme environment. Now, how you bring that to life in the outback in Australia and northern Alberta are going to be very different, but it's the outcome that's important, that the animals being protected, either from extreme heat or extreme cold, is what you're looking for, and that's what the verification is having that conversation with the producer to say, on your operation, tell me how you protect your animals when there's extreme environment conditions here. That's what it is. So it's not show me this, show me that, and I'm going to check mark or not. It's let's have a dialogue about what you're doing here.
So on the website it said basically that it's more outcome-based. You used the word outcome several times. It's more outcome-based indicators, and provided an example of keeping males intact versus pain mitigation during castration. Do you think that there will be people who think that the outcome-based parameters are a little too general?
I think it's certainly a criticism that people could make. I don't think it's the right criticism. Where you really want to start with stuff like this is you have to have that. This is how we're all going to learn, is you're verifying that the operation is achieving a positive outcome, right? That's what's important. Now, we in the pilot didn't just have you're achieving a positive outcome or you're not. We did develop a scoring mechanism. There is a range. There are thresholds that you have to meet for us to have sort of checked the box that says that you are a verified sustainable producer under the pilot process. So there was real veracity behind it, and it's not just a, if you signed up, you made it kind of thing. So it is there, but it allows everybody to be on a different part of the journey, and as long as you're moving forward, you're going to get credit for doing that.
Okay. So there were 182 operations involved along the pilot process. What were some of the learnings McDonald's Canada take away from it?
Yeah. One of the things I think that we were just really delighted with was we had more response for people who wanted to do verifications than we had time or resources allocated to do, which was really heartening for us, and I think is setting the Canadian Roundtable as they develop their verification framework, which is really going to take what we hopefully accelerated into the future. So it's great that they have a bunch of pent-up demand of people who are ready to do this. And we definitely got some key takeaways from stuff. I think what the verifiers saw was such a mix of how people achieve different things, and that's really, we go back to outcomes-based versus just focusing on a practice, is that it allowed producers to feel really proud about what they were doing, because you could talk about, this is specific to us because this is the situation we have on our ranch and we're doing this or that, and then when the verifier said, yeah, that's great, this is, often it was asking through questions in that dialogue that they were finding out things that they were scoring that they would have never even thought to mention, right? So it was through that dialogue they were coming out, and the verifiers would say, well, that, you should have told me that, that's great, writing that stuff down. One of the things I think we did learn is sort of something we'd like to see some more of is record keeping and a willingness to share information up and down the value chain a little bit more flexibly. So when we saw it, the feedlots was really fantastic record keeping, which you would expect, and certainly bigger cow-calf operations had really good record keeping as well. Now, when you get down to the smaller ones, it's completely understandable, but it's hard for a verifier to, even through discussion, you just get more points if you have some documentation that you can show. And some of it is not just documentation about documenting things you've done. It's, here are our procedures for how we're going to deal with a broken needle. This is how we're going to deal with different things, and it's kind of, is your operation set up should something happen to you, or should you not be there one day and something happens? Do the people who are managing it for you, do they have a binder they can go to? Do they have a place where they can see, this is how you as the owner, the operator of this operation, say this is how my animals need to be treated in this kind of a situation? And so that's some of the stuff I think that operations are doing them. If they just have some of that documentation, it makes it a lot easier for us to verify it and then talk to consumers about, this is how we know. It's not just like it's not good enough for McDonald's to say, well, just because we know. It's also, we need that help from the producer, so it's not just because, well, this is what would happen if it did happen. If you see it, it's real.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned information exchange. There's still a bit of pushback on things like VIX?
Yeah, and I would say it's not even pushback as much as just reluctance in a sense, and that's fair. I think we learned early on in the process that the first iteration of BICS wasn't the most user-friendly piece of technology that had ever been developed, and that I think really speaks to, again, the Canadian industry's willingness to support this. When we were starting to do this and we identified that we would like to use, or that we had identified BICS as an opportunity to not create something on our own, but to use a producer-developed and supported tool, CCA and others really came to the table, and then ViewTrack Solutions bought 50% of BICS and have taken it now to an amazing level of interactivity, and it can do so much more now we just need producers now to want to share that information, and not just producers too, right? The packers, the feeders, everybody, that's where the real value is going to come from everybody, and putting that information in and being able to take really actionable information back out.
So the producers involved in the pilot got basically a free assessment of their farm. What about going forward? What will producers get from this whole process?
So the pilot was just what it was. It's a pilot project. We wanted to be really clear we weren't developing a McDonald's standard. We wanted to help accelerate the work of the Canadian Roundtable that was already going to be doing this stuff, and the Canadian Roundtable was going to be developing their own indicators and their own verification and assurance framework, which they are doing. So we committed from the very beginning that this was not an attempt to subvert that or to create our own to stand alongside it. It was to help us learn internally, but also help them learn from our experience, and again, that leadership through acceleration. So we're going to be continuing to work with the CRSB. We're going to continue to increase the amount of sustainable beef that we purchase, but it will be verified under the Canadian Roundtable's framework, not the McDonald's pilot one going forward. And that's what we hope for all responsible retailers in Canada, that they will join the roundtable and look to have that, so that we can really build the Canadian beef advantage versus individual brand advantage on beef sustainability specifically.
So would McDonald's, if it came down to verified sustainable being sold at a premium, would McDonald's be willing to pay that premium?
Well, I think it's premature at this point to know if there is premiums involved, where they would fall in the chain. And I think we've seen, we always have answered that question in a couple of ways. Is the real premium that you're going to get now from being involved in it is, one, continued confidence from the Canadian consumer. We see the trend line for beef consumption. We see how many more chicken products we're being asked for. So the first step is really preserving the market share that you have now and the trust of Canadians, and this is one of those aspects that is really going to help that, and that's where McDonald's can play a really important role of communicating consumers. The other one is with half of the beef being exported from Canada, it's a huge advantage on the international market to be able to say we as an industry, again, not niche programs, we as an industry are working to verify the sustainable beef production of the whole Canadian industry. That's a huge advantage. So those things alone are worth more to producers than any sort of individual monetary per pound thing could come from. But I think this is something that the roundtable is going to have to take on, and that's why having producers, having packers, having retailers, having NGOs, having everybody at that table, as those discussions happen about if there are added costs, where do they best belong in a free market-based system. That's those conversations are still coming and they're still happening now, but it's certainly something that I think everybody is aware of.
Mm-hmm. So there were 182 producers, getting back to that. Their production line wasn't segregated at the packing plant. So how does McDonald's know that they actually do have some of that verified sustainable beef?
Yeah, it's a great question. Be careful what you ask for, because it's unfortunately a bit technical for the response. But that, I always say, it brings the veracity to it that it is technical. So using the Beef Information Exchange System, we were able to track through RFID tags and premise IDs from cow-calf right up, obviously, to the packers. So once they get there, obviously, they're being processed, and you can't follow individual animals anymore without segregation. So there's an approach called mass balance, which is used in a lot of other industries for palm oil, for coffee, forestry, which is really, we're still able to track how many verified animals went into the plant that day. We know how many animals were processed that day, and then following from there up to how many pounds of beef were then sent to the Spruce Grove patty plant that makes all of the hamburger patties for McDonald's Canada. We know those percentages, so you can do the math and say on a mass balance approach, this is how much verified sustainable beef would have went through that day and ended up. So you do that over time, and then just with the law of averages, you can have confidence that the number that you're stating is very accurate for that, and that's what they've done for other industries. So that's where we've taken the approach. It was really the only responsible one to do at this point, because segregation has a lot of other complexities to it. So mass balance, I think, really works and is a real opportunity to, again, get everybody coming to the table, because it allows everybody to be in the mix, as it were.
So today you hand over your results basically to the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. The Roundtable has people from all different food retail outlets and restaurants. So what is McDonald's getting out of all of this work that they've done going forward?
Yeah, for us, it's really demonstrating the leadership. It's demonstrating the commitment that we have, that we didn't wait for others to do that we didn't say, well, the roundtable's working on it, we'll wait and we'll tell consumers, for the next few years that someone else is working on it and we'll deal with it. It was a way for us to say this is important to our consumers, and it's important to us as a company to ensure that we're sourcing beef responsibly and sustainably. So we're going to invest and drive that leadership, drive that acceleration of where the industry's already decided it's going to go itself. So it's really that support, the leadership, that's what we're getting out of it. As I said, we don't want to compete on sustainability aspects. It's just not who we are as a company to say we want to have sustainable beef and we want other people not to, so we can then market it. We want everybody to have sustainable beef because we want to use that as McDonald's Canada. This is why we have the commitment to 100% Canadian beef, 100% Canadian chicken, 100% Canadian dairy, 100% Canadian eggs, potatoes, is because we are really committed to Canadian agriculture. So for us, the real competition, the competitive advantage is going to come from having the Canadian beef advantage. That's what McDonald's Canada wants, is to have the profile of sustainability relative to Canadian beef be a real shine and have that be that. And we'll compete on lots of other things, with our great competitors. There's endless array of things to do to compete on. Sustainability of agriculture is not one that we should be competing on.
We have a big jam-packed afternoon planned, so we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for your interest.